Hi, y'all. So the other day I was in Proverbs chapter 9 and I was studying it, and the Spirit just came upon me and I received this very great divine revelation. One entire month, God has been, seriously leading me, to reading the book of Proverbs and the importance of gaining wisdom and, and gaining understanding in, this walk of Christ and just in my daily life. But when I tell y'all what God revealed to me through this chapter was so divine, it was so on time, and it was something very much needed. I was like, man, I gotta come up on here because I'm getting that feeling I need to come on here and I need to, express this to all y'all on this platform. So as I was in the book of Proverbs, Proverbs chapter 9, it was explaining about, wisdom being a she. And it was explaining about as wisdom being a person. It was saying like how wisdom was building her house. And as wisdom built her house, she prepared a dinner. She fixed the meats. She prepared the wine. How she also, furnished the table. And which means, fellowship, being in communion and, eating and, just having that fellowship time, which is the table. And it explained how in verse 3, how she cried out in the midst of the city. She was calling out to those who were simple-minded. She was calling out to those who lacked understanding, like, you who lack understanding, come in, come dine with me, come have fellowship with me. Meaning that there is a direct invitation from wisdom in which we all need to cohere to. And it wasn't until I read verse 5 and 6 where it just all hit me. And this is wisdom speaking, and she says, "Come, eat of my bread, and drink of the wine I have mixed. Forsake foolishness and live, and go in the way of understanding." So if you guys read from verses 1 through 4, it not only talks about how, she's crying out to those who lack understanding. She's crying out to those, who lack the wisdom thereof. But it also talks about how she prepares the table for fellowship. She's, slaughtering the meats. She's mixing the wines. And I don't know about you, but whenever somebody is, about to have company come over, they have to show that level of hospitality. They have to get the house furnished. They have to get everything, cleaned up. They have to get all the dinner prepared, the drinks ready and prepped for that when the guests come in, they'll be well welcomed. They'll be, warm-heartedly invited in and feel welcome in there. And this is what God was explaining to you, is that the same way that people show hospitality and prepare oneself for people to come over and to enjoy fellowship, it's the same way how wisdom invites us in so we can be able to obtain her, so that we can be able to fellowship along with her to gain it. And as I was thinking about this, because I was in the Spirit, as I kept thinking about how wisdom consistently invites us in to come in and fellowship with her, I thought about that verse in Revelation 3:20, where it says, Jesus knocks on the doors of our heart. This is Jesus, and he says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in to him and dine with him, and he with me." So we have to realize that there is a direct correlation between Jesus and wisdom. And we also have to realize that Jesus is the embodiment of wisdom. If wisdom knocks on the door of our hearts, if wisdom consistently invites us in to come in and fellowship with her, and if Jesus consistently knocks on the doors of our hearts, waiting for us to open our hearts up to him, just so he could come in and dine with us and fellowship with us and have that intimacy and have that close relationship with us, then that means that Jesus has to be the embodiment of wisdom. This is why when we gain wisdom from this world, when we gain understanding from worldly insight, it always leads to a dead end. It's because everything that's of this world that we gain is from the flesh. Not only just of the flesh, but us as humans, we have a limited understanding. There's only so much that our brains can comprehend. There's only so much that we know. But when it comes to God, he's all-knowing. When it comes to God, he's the creator of all things. So he has more insight that is more than what we could comprehend, more than we could fathom. When it comes to God, you can learn one thing from God, but then yet it can lead to one revelation, then to a whole nother revelation, to a whole nother entire revelation, and it keeps going on and on because he's infinite and because he's all-knowing, is because, he's very powerful, in nature. But like I said, just like how Jesus knocks on the doors of our hearts to fellowship with us, to have a relationship with us, and he consistently does it. Just like how the same way wisdom invites us into her home to fellowship and have communion and have fellowship with her. But we truly have to realize that by Jesus being the embodiment of wisdom, that Jesus is not going to force himself upon us. Whenever Jesus invites us to fellowship with him, whenever Jesus knocks on the doors of our hearts to have a relationship with him, Jesus is never going to force anybody to have any kinds of relationship or any kinds of intimacy with him. At the end of the day, all of us have free will. And God didn't want us to be or operate like robots. He didn't want us to operate in this robotic-like state. So he gave us free will to either choose good or evil, to be either choose, spiritual and heavenly wisdom or carnal and fleshly wisdom. Because God simply wants a people that are willing out of their own will to choose him, and not him forcefully having us worship him out of, being forced. As I continued to just start realizing this, God had ended up leading me to 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 18, where I proceeded to also read verses 18 to 21. And it says, "For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to those who are being saved, it is the power of God, for it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise and bring to nothing the understanding of the prudent." Where is the wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the disputer of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of this world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world through wisdom did not know God, it pleased God through the foolishness of the message preached to save those who believe. Then I was led to verse 26 to 27. And it says, "For you see your calling, brethren, that not many wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called. But God has chosen the foolish things of the world to put to shame the wise. And God has chosen the weak things of the world to put to shame the things which are mighty." So now what Paul basically is saying is that the message of the cross is foolishness to people who are perishing. Meaning that people who lack spiritual wisdom, people who lack godly wisdom, truly don't understand that God actually brought a man who was sinless, who was perfect, and he died on the cross for our sins. And he paid the debts and he laid the burdens on the cross for us so that we may have relationship with the Father. Now, whether that be the Jews seeking a sign or the Greeks seeking human wisdom, both parties thought that these things were foolish because it didn't come in a way in which they were satisfied with, or because it didn't make sense to their logic. They were not able to comprehend what God was doing through Jesus Christ. God simply came down to our level. He simply came down to our logical understanding so that we may understand what he was doing. Because to us, it seems foolish to die for people who hate you, to die for people who are going to spit on you and slap on you. And that is foolish to us. That sounds crazy to us. But God uses what seems foolish all for his glory. God may use what may seem unwise to be the greatest and most powerful thing that people's minds can even ever comprehend or wrap around. So God is simply so good that he can literally use our foolish, limited amounts of wisdom and logic and turn it straight into gold. He could also turn what may look like a mishap to many of us into a full-blown miracle, all for the saving of our souls. That's why I said Jesus Christ's wisdom, God's wisdom, his almighty knowing, his almighty power is way more powerful than what we can comprehend. Through his wisdom brings forth life. Through his wisdom brings forth salvation, redemption, reconciliation. Through his wisdom brings forth power. Well, to conclude all this, if God is knocking on the door of your heart, if God is preparing a table for you to fellowship with him, for you to have communion with him, for you to have relationship with him, then open the door and let Jesus be received. And let Jesus receive you. Because the greatest thing that you could ever do, the greatest thing in life that you could ever obtain, not flashly, materialistic, worldly things, but it is a relationship with Christ, and it is his wisdom. Because in his wisdom, in his understanding, is what brings forth true blessings, is what brings forth true power, true life through his spirit. So take that opportunity to gain wisdom, because you never know when's the next time you're going to run into it. God bless.